All right, Robert, guess what? We are live with your first webinar. How's it feel?
It feels exciting and very, very interesting.
All
I'm
right.
happy.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, I'm excited too. Um, so we've got some people joining. They'll be kind of trickling in. Hopefully, the attendees, you guys can stick around for the entirety of it. We're planning on 25 to 30 minutes, so not a ton of time. But I'm excited for this. These webinars will be regular. If you don't know Robert Champion, he is an industry expert when it comes to packaging automation. He is the president of InnoFlex Solutions, and he's going to be talking to us about ensuring scope and supply in 2021 and creating some packaging ecosystems. You guys can see the slides, packaging ecosystems that deliver. So here is just a few housekeeping things for the people who have joined us. Make sure if you have some questions, throw them in the chat or in the questions, and we'll try to get to them kind of towards the end. There's a ton of great information here. We are recording the webinar, so it will be available in case you gotta run, your kids come into your office. Everyone's working from home anyways now, so whatever it is, if you got to do it, this will be recorded. My name's Adam. I'm going to be kind of helping moderate, but you won't hear my voice too much throughout the rest of this. I work in the packaging industry for Fortis Solutions Group, and then I host a podcast that Robert's been on, actually, the People of Packaging podcast. Yeah. So you can check that out. So with all that being said, Robert, I am going to turn the time over to you, but I'm going to jump in if something doesn't make any sense or if I got a question. So I'm going to be sort of an attendee with power. How does that sound?
Oh, that's always good. Keep me in line because you never know where I may go.
Awesome.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining. And as Adam said, this is a great time. It's a great time of the year to reflect and move forward into 2021. And it's just good to have you, and we welcome you. And, if you look at 2021 or 2020, a lot of disruption, a lot of changes in a good way. I think a lot of the disruption has caused us to reevaluate what we're doing, how we're doing it, and getting prepared for 2021. And 2021 will not be like 2020. You're going to be asked to do more, faster, and you're going to have to compress your cycle time. So we hopefully can shed some light on some good housekeeping things to do in your process to help you drive toward 2021. And the question as we go through this, how are you going to deliver that scope and deliver it to your customer? Because we're going to think about our customer as we talk through these slides. So if you look at supply and demand, this is just generally an overview. You will see that, 2018, some of our supply systems, our logistics systems, and how we get goods and services to different outlets. The green means a lot of push. The red means not so much, and the black means it's nominal. That's just what it means. You look at 2019, you'll see a little bit of noise. The green's still good. You look at 2020, you'll say, wow, there's a shift here. We all know why. And it's because people are eating at home. There's more consumption at home. It's just, our institutional and our restaurants have suffered, but they're going to pick back up. And some of your big customers in the food and beverage space are going to be ready. They're going to ramp up to be the first in line to get that product to those customers and do it quickly. So we want you to be, if you're an OEM, be prepared to deliver that product and your equipment to these services. So we're going to talk about the packaging eco-technical domain. And I call it this is just something I thought about, as you sit and you think about business and people. We have a passion for people. We have a passion for food and beverage companies and OEMs, but you talk about scope. And so when you talk about scope, it's the roadmap to success. And I think a lot of the misnomers and the mishaps happen in the scoping phase. And the scope just perpetuates down through the whole ecosystem into operations. So if your scope is not good and clear and succinct and defined, understanding it might not be 100%, and that you may need have some outliers that you need to bring back into scope. Wow, we need to get a hold of that quickly now into 2020 going into 2021. So I'm going to say, look at your 2021 projects, go back to your OEMs, your stakeholders, and reevaluate the scope. And I'll tell you some of the key things to look through. We're going to talk about solutions driving value and cost back down when you look at the right scope, and then your people are very, very important to your success. And then also, simplify. We need to simplify what we do and how we do it. So when we leverage technology and automation, it makes sense to your stakeholders, which will be inside factories, inside plants, so you can have sustained results. So that's the key, is sustained results that deliver value.
Hey, Robert, quick question for you. So would you say that proper scope is like a good foundation, for a house? Like, it seems like if you're missing that, if you're not really laying down that good foundation, then your house is gonna fall apart. Your walls are gonna be a little funky, and the whole thing could not work. So would that be a proper analogy? As I'm oversimplifying? We're talking about simplicity, but
Yeah, at the end of the day, exactly. And that's where the easy stuff gets missed, and exponentially it costs the most on a project in time. That's some of the key deliverables. Adam, spot on. And scope cannot be rushed. Yes, with the acceleration of moving fast, it doesn't mean moving fast with mistakes. So the question is, how are you going to move and depress cycle times and deliver quality and deliver it with all the elements that your customer and consumer are asking you to deliver? Let me give you another analogy, good one. So one of my daughters is a chef. She's a culinary chef. She has a business. So I have her make me these special cookies. I love chocolate chip cookies that are bittersweet, dark chocolate. So she made me a special cookie with coconut in it, nuts, and now she sells it on a menu. But it was created for me. Now she made me a new batch recently, but it was not the same. The ingredients, she changed an ingredient, the cookie was flatter, and I could tell the difference. And so I wasn't happy with it, right? So that's how your customer is. The scope, they can tell when things are not going to run well, and it happens for them when it goes into operations. A good analogy, Adam. So scope really is about your people, product, your modes of operation, and logistics. And I'm going to say these are kind of there are 5 pillars. And in scope, the thing we're trying to do is, you're not going to capture everything always immediately. But, and again, this webinar is not going to get really deep, but we're going to just tap the surface. But this is the most important part, because if you don't have the right controls around variability in the scope, the variability could be in people's capability from a corporate level, and then a factory plant level, their ability, whether they're permanent employees or temporary, their skill sets. The product is a huge one. It's getting a handle on your internal product variability. And I won't go deep there. It could be rigid bottles, it could be food itself, but those variabilities, if you don't have control measures to capture what that looks like, it'll impact your project and your ongoing operations negatively. And if you talk about modes of operation, this is a big piece that a lot of OEMs don't get well when they work with their big food and beverage companies, is how do they plan to run that line, that system? There are routines that they have in their interact and engagement with the line, and you need to document that. And you need to document that so it can be translated into a deliverable, as we talk later on, is in the technology that people will adhere to, and then be able to deliver. And then logistics into operations and flexibility. So these are just some key things on scope. Scope sets the foundation. And without good scope, you're gonna just be creeping up a bad road or a bumpy road. And we don't want you to do that going into 2021.
Hey, Robert, before you move on to the next thing, what are some ways that OEMs and food and beverage companies can collaborate to avoid scope creep as they're going into 2021? Maybe it's
Yes.
the OEM who is, I don't know, trying to sell more stuff, or the food and beverage company who is trying to squeeze more juice out of the orange. So how do they align together to make sure that they're staying on point with the scope of the project?
Good question. So one of the things, collaboration. This is going to be really simple. What happens is asking the right key questions that are prevalent to your industry. But I'm going to jump ahead in the slides. It's looking at things through your customer's lens. So you have to put the customer's lens on and understand their customer. So if it's an OEM delivering capital equipment to a CPG, you have to look at their customer, which would be the big box stores or e-commerce. Why are they asking? And then you have to look at the consumer. So the consumer is driving the customer, that drives the CPG, that drives the OEM. So I'm going to say, just start looking at this ecosystem on who's asking for what. Bring that early into your conversation when you do your request for information, your proposal, and just have that collaboration, because you'll uncover a lot of things that are not spoken until after you get that purchase order, and you have change orders, then you have delays, and then you miss scope, and you have not efficient operations, or your cost variants are not good.
Gotcha.
So collaboration is key, Adam. And it's collaboration means listen, ask for understanding, ask a question, get the feedback, and then ask why. So I'm going to give you some of the tools that are used in the industry for problem solving, and we use this sometimes when we look at line efficiency. It's 5 why. Just sit and ask 5 whys, different type of questions that are in different functional areas, and just start asking those questions, and just start filling in the gaps. Good question, Adam.
That's great. Thanks, Robert.
So the other pillar we were going to talk about, Adam, did I answer your question? Okay. It's solutions.
Yes, you did. Sorry, I realized we're not necessarily on camera. I gave the thumbs up on the camera, but you're not being able to see it. So yeah, I did. Thanks.
Yeah. So scope will impact your costs. So one of the things, Adam, you said was, how do you ensure that we get the right scope? Engage the supplier early. Engage them early and frequently. So now your 2021 projects that you already laid out, the foundation 2020, get them back in, reevaluate the scope of what you asked them to deliver, and make sure that they can deliver it. And there's a hidden nugget here, and I'm moving ahead in the slide. There may be some R&D areas that you think are off the shelf that are not clear. We can do this, but they're really R&D underlying items you've asked them to deliver. And you need to bring that back to surface to say, wow, what is the mitigation if we can't deliver this, and how are we going to, let's quantify this risk to the project. So get people back in, do a risk review, and then do a mitigation on the impact of that risk on cost, time, and schedule. And then you want to look at just quantifying those risks. What's the impact? And the risks are in those 4 areas: people, product, modes of operation, and your flexibility. So those 4 buckets on the first slide on scope are key. What are the variables in any one of those? And your supplier needs to think about your business and what you're doing, and then you need to be thinking about as a requester, what can your supplier deliver? What are their limitations? And if you have the discovery up front, you'll mitigate the downstream aggravation and the bad relationships that I've seen sometimes happen often too many times because of just not asking the right questions. Good intentions, but people are moving so fast that they don't ask the right questions.
Hey, Robert, one question that I see here. Would you have any examples of those in like a PDF form that we could share afterwards? Or is that something that maybe you could give an example of that we could share with people that, what were the 3 documents, if you go back a slide real quickly?
Sure.
So the project risk review, the mitigation review, and then how to quantify risk. Is that something that you can share, or in further detail, or maybe that's another webinar? I don't know.
It is a webinar. It's more detail, but we're going to say on a summary, because what InnoFlex Solutions is trying to do for the industry is help bring this collaboration together. Because what we want in our purpose and passion, we want people fed, and we want the product on shelf or delivered to home.
Yeah.
We don't want to face another regression with supply screaming or crunching down on supply because you have inefficient operations. So we're our holistic organization to help you win. To answer your question specifically, Adam, yes, we'll do it on a summary level, because more of what we do as far as our IP intellectual property and how we do it, it's a one-on-one discussion that we can have with those that are interested.
Okay, great, thanks. We can keep going.
Good question. Yep. We talked about variable costs just real quickly, and now I'm going to talk about invigorating your people. Managing people in my career in organizations, I found that your processes are great, your scope is good. You need to engage and invigorate people, because they're going to champion that through the organization. Even with all the AI stuff we have and being able to capture knowledge, you still need people to input or create the platforms for this success of the tools. So you need to invigorate people in your teams in collaboration. Ask team members about the goals that you've set, about their perspective on the strategy and also the implementation. Get their perspective. So if you're a director and you've got managers working for you, don't just drive it down. Have that collaboration bottom back up. and from the factory level. Get the input from those with hands-on, touching the on button and touching the stop button on the HMI, how they plan to run that line or that system, so you can get it back up and invigorate everyone. Because if you don't invigorate people to want to, again, I'm, pun on my own last name, you want them to be, winners, to take you through and to live with it once you've implemented it. So we want to engage them and get their experiences. Oftentimes we don't capture their experience, and I'm dragging onto the end of the presentation with some of the tools we can use to capture machine learning and behaviors. But before that, you don't want to capture bad behaviors. You want to work on the soft people side skills so that when they're running a line, you get good behaviors, right? And so you can improve and have that continual improvement cycle. So in operations, capture routines that deliver good baseline results. So we need to really, I believe that having this conversation right now, if you are in CPG or food and beverage leading company or mid-sized company and an OEM, have the conversation. Stop, pause, get on a 5-minute phone call and say, hey, I just want to make sure the scope we have, maybe I'm missing something. Can we regroup and look at this? Maybe, is there a variable in one of these 4 areas that we haven't discovered that's going to impact the project? Is it the people? Is it the product? Is it the modes of operation? Do we have enough? And maybe we don't capture it all, but let's quantify those risks, because it's going to come back and bite you one way or the other. Okay? So, simplify, simplify, simplify. I'm a big proponent, and I like processes and systems. I think in data, I think in process, I think in sequence of operation, I think the big picture. But at the end of the day, you can take all of that information, as I talk to big companies, and what they're saying is data is great for them, but we need to simplify it at the operator level, because you don't get to food just because you've got these great machines. At least today, we've had operators engaging with the machines. Yeah, there are lines that are we call lights out factories, where you just turn on the green button in the factory and it can run autonomously without people. Yes, there's some of that. But as we still have people employed and engaged, we want to simplify things that we do. So I'm going to challenge both sides to focus on 1 or 2 things that can bring you two together. So when I was working for a big CPG, I would challenge my OEMs to bring to table to me something that was their uniquely competitive advantage. And what I was asking them for is explore what's different between them and their competitor, because it's a me too industry in the packaging industry, robotics and stuff. But what is that key thing that will cause me to really work with you and simplify what we do? And decide on the scope on what the customers and the consumers, from the customers and consumers standpoint. This is hard. No one thinks about the consumer, you or I, when we buy that package of product, when we can't open it because the seal is hard to open, or my mother who's in her 80s because she's aging and she can't really open it because of the material variance and the sealing temperature variance. We're not thinking about the demographics enough at the front end. We need to do it more on the R&D side before we go dashing out to launch a new product versus what we do today. And again, I'm repeating myself, and this is important. Scope is wide in the beginning. Start using a periscope to narrow it down, and in that periscope, look at it for short and long-term goals, and then offer the customer something that they've not thought of. What does that mean? So if you know your customer, I'm just making this up without divulging any confidential information, are competitive in a space that their competition is also on shelf with, but maybe there's something that's missing that you see by walking the display aisles in the store shelf, or your family consumption, your child, or your relatives brought it to your attention. Bring something back to your customer that they can in turn bring to their organization, and maybe it's an opportunity for them to win. That separates you from a competitor. And oftentimes those little small things spur the innovation wheel, and you can be part of their innovation tree by bringing them something different and unique. So think about that. Something that they're struggling with that maybe they're not aware of, again, in scope. Maybe you know that their product is not consistent in taste or quality or presentation, but you can bring them something and say, hey, if you did this, this will be a game changer. So that's collaboration. Simplify, simplify, simplify.
Hey, Robert, do you think it's safe to say that, simplification does not necessarily mean, it's certainly not easy. Sometimes it seems to me the more, take like, I think about Amazon a lot. I think everyone knows about Amazon. So
Sure.
You know, to me, it seems simple as a consumer, right? I think, oh, I want a thing, the light bulbs. Like I just ordered light bulbs. I need light
Yeah.
bulbs. And I go onto my phone and I go into this app and I click light bulbs and then they show up 2 days later. That's simple to me, but it doesn't mean that the logistics behind all of that, these wheels, that's not simple. And so, you know, I don't want people to think like, oh, we just have to have simple solutions. Would you say it's fair to say that you're trying to make things simple for your consumer or your consumers' consumers? That's what you're driving towards. But that doesn't mean that, you know, making robotics is simple. That could be incredibly complicated and complex. But understanding that it's driving towards a common goal. Again, I like the periscope idea of, am I making life easier and more simplified for my customer's customer?
Exactly. Adam, you hit it spot on. At the end of the day, all we do is for the consumer. It's all about the consumer, in the last mile, the person that gets the product. And yeah, you're exactly right. Your methodology to get there causes collaboration. Yeah. So the consumer is going to always pull the market back to the customer, which are your big stores. I'm not going to name them. You know who they are.
Yeah.
And they're going to be coming back to the food and beverage company saying, we want this. And then the food and beverage company is going to push down on the OEM, say, we want this. And the OEM is going to say, yeah, what? But how are you going to do it? And you know, all this confusion. If you have this collaboration ongoing as a partnership, you, in essence, they become an external part of your team. Yeah. And it's very important that as you begin to simplify, you're not simplifying. You can simplify your operation. Let me back that up by understanding abnormalities in scope and in operations. Because if you can get things right on the scope, your operations will run better. Let me give you another example. Your lean manufacturing will be better because you're producing at a higher efficiency because you scoped it right. You have the buy-in of your people. We talked about that. You have your product running very well. And you can now, if you're pushed by the consumer, to create this new widget, this new flavor, this new taste, this new quantity of one, batch of one, you can do it because you have the available line capacity. You're not bottlenecking your line to do it. And that's what food companies are asking for. Help me help my end consumer. If you help the end consumer, everyone wins. Profit is there, revenue's there. But what we don't always do is think about going back in and saying, again, remember I talk about the scope doesn't mean after the initial sell and a capital equipment, you cannot go back in on the installed base and say, can I help you do X, Y, Z in this new scope areas where there's an issue and variability. Maybe there's a variability. Maybe there, with the population change and demographics, especially in manufacturing, you know, hands-on problem solving is not there. Most of it needs to be digital. So the new wave of people coming in think digital and how to solve problems through those tools, right? So we need to be thinking about helping our customer improve. So at the end of the day, for me, it's about food on shelf. I don't want to see any more of this nonsense we had in the pandemic because our food lines, and I'm not picking on food lines, were not running at their probably design capability because we didn't take it serious as being an OEM.
That's
great question. I don't know where I'm at on time.
We've got about 5 minutes left. So
all right, so I think we're moving pretty at a good pace. So I'm sorry about if I'm long-winded or speaking fast, I'll slow my pace down. We get to technology.
Awesome, Robert.
Yeah, let's get to technology. I love technology, right? So engineer, love that stuff, love it. I eat and breathe it, right? So technology and a benefit for the customer. I want to get this point across. Have that collaboration when you're thinking that someone walks through a packaging show and they see all these nice automated pieces of equipment that does this, does that. It's going to go back to scope and those 4 elements: people, product, modes of operation, flexibility, and logistics. There's more underneath there I can't get into, but automation should be solving one of those problems or opportunities and enabling some flexibility for these companies to be able to leverage their strategic plan to differentiate themselves from their competition. It also should be driving to solve regulatory issues that are probably there, that they're, legacy issues. It should be solving a problem, an opportunity, and creating great opportunity. Yeah. And I think when you're talking about your customer is, digital and 4.0, the space of digitalization, is talk to your customer and where they're at, give them enough information to understand what's possible, and then incrementally let them grow with you. This could be the big food companies or the small, very small co-packers, co-manufacturers, but help them grow with you, because at the end of the day, it goes back to scope. If you bring in this technology and the operators don't see the value, your numbers won't be great, all right? Until we have lights out factories, if that's the wave of the future with autonomous everything, then that's another story. Then you're going to have to account for people, right? And we know it's changing. The landscape is changing with what we just faced with, having reliable functions in place. That mean people are reliable, but machines are what they are, and we need to understand that your customer is thinking in this space. But technology must provide a benefit to your customer. And no one want. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to tell you. Sorry, I read an article recently that said, this is one of the fastest growing areas within the packaging industry is automation and technology, and it's really been forced upon the industry because of the pandemic. And to your point, this is why I think it's so critical that there might be a lot of really large companies and even smaller companies and mid-sized companies in food and beverage who are still reeling from that pressure that came from a spike in demand in a lot of places.
Sure.
And so, having an understanding and having good partnerships, I think, is probably what the differentiator was between not just lost sales in the year 2020, but lost long-term customers. If they showed up to the store and your product's not on the shelf, they bought someone else's product.
They had to.
Come back.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the fear for food and beverage company. You don't want to lose market share. You want to maintain and grow market share. A couple other, you hit some key points. So this is important. The results in operations, in reducing costs, increasing throughput, and hitting efficiency targets, and maintaining production time. So yeah, this is our new normal. Mm-hmm. We need to really engage. And again, let's go back to scope. So it all starts out with the first slide. And I've been in a chair where we've issued scope. Here's what we want. I've been on the other side receiving the scope as an OEM. I can tell you, looking at both of those areas, that the challenge is reevaluating what you thought you asked for, uncovering those things that are not in that document or electronic document. Now, remember, we talked about 2021 is going to be more asked of you, and especially from your stakeholders in your organization. They want stuff on shelf to create that market growth. In operations, you're going to have to help them. And, this is the new normal. So mm-hmm. we need to figure out how to do this. And it goes back to scope. So clearly, take a step back from 2020. Re-engage with your customers going into 2021. You're starting off in January. Have that first 30-minute, let's just talk through these projects. I know we've already put a down payment on. I want to be sure that you're successful. And I'm darn sure we probably missed something. Let's understand what we missed and what's the impact to the project. Take the time to do that, because if you don't take the time now, you will pay for it exponentially more so downstream in operations. It's going to cost more money. It's going to bottleneck supply and demand, and your relationship with your customer is not going to be very well. And we want to stop that.
Right.
So with that, I'm pretty much that's pretty much what I want to share today.
That's our 30 minutes. That went by quick, and I'm excited to maybe dive into some of these topics with you a little bit deeper in some webinars coming up. So let's how can people get in touch with you, Robert? Do you have a contact slide or something? Just quickly in case they're.
Yep. So let's see if it shows up. Did it?
No. I don't see it, but that's all right. I mean, I'm sure.
All right. But here's the contact information. You can get a hold of me, Robert Champion. I'm at InnoFlex Solutions. My email address is robert.champion@innoflexsolutions.com. Our web site is innoflexsolutions.com. You can see more about what we do. And the number to directly call us at is 248-214-8480. We're going to have this available, this presentation, I'm sure, Adam, to send out to people, make it available. But it's we're positioned to help you win. At the end of the day, we look at things holistically, and it's a different space, a different way of talking. But really, at the end of the day, I don't want you facing bad conversations in the middle and toward the end of the project because things were missed. You could avoid it up front by following some tools that we just scratched the surface. We didn't even go deep enough. So that's pretty much it.
That's great. Well, yeah, I'll encourage everyone to reach out to Robert at InnoFlex, and you can even connect with him. I connected with him on LinkedIn, so just look for Robert Champion on LinkedIn. If you're an OEM and you're looking for some help on how to properly position your equipment and understand scope, and Robert has been on the other side of that conversation, along with having worked for an OEM. So he's a tremendous resource. He's there for you to help drive your products and help your customers as well. So Robert, appreciate you being on, and hopefully we'll get some folks reaching out so that we can keep our shelves stocked and people fed, and
yes,
that's what it's all about.
Good times in 2021. Everyone be safe and be blessed. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Robert.